Hi everyone, Doug Adams here to talk about all things running with you. And I'm excited to talk about something that we spend a lot of time in our courses and we go over these 5 categories of running gait, but probably one of the questions we get asked most is, what's the most common? And really, it's this overstrider. So I want to talk to you about this because it's pretty easy to identify, and if you know what you're doing, it can be really easy to correct. So I want to go over just a little bit of what that is, and I want to also give you a really good drill that can help out with this that I found a lot of success with, and I also want to give you a gait retraining cue that you can use to help people that you find this in. So first off, let's take a look and see what overstriding is. And I'm going to move this full screen for us so you can see here. This is an example. It wasn't too hard for me to act here. This is quite a few years back now, but looking at this, you'll see this in the sagittal plane, so you get a side view, and you'll see where that foot's really reaching way out in front, and a few characteristic things that we'll see about it. So in a 2D, it's actually pretty easy to observe in 2 dimensions, and in 3 dimensions, we're going to see the same thing, although we'll have a little bit more supporting evidence. So again, won't see a lot from frontal, but as we go to the side, you'll really see that foot gets way out in front, the knee is straight, and a lot of times you'll notice it's low profile. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in a second here. But it really is something that we see a lot of runners doing, and it's very characteristic of that. And if we're going to identify it, in the 3D, we use measures. This happens at initial contact. So we'll look at the angle of their foot inclination relative to the ground. We'll look at their tibial inclination. So is their shin vertical or is it more flexed or extended? And then we'll also look at a number called their strike from center of mass to see how far their foot's landing in front of them. And these numbers are really helpful to be able to identify, did we actually change and how much so. But if you're using 2D, this is still something that you can really look at. And one of the things that we saw is this malleolar line. So if you see one of those white lines, it comes from malleolus and goes straight vertical. If that lands in front of the knee, that's a pretty easy way to give some subjective evidence to show that they are overstriding. Now, there is no set answer in stone about what overstriding is, but this is a pretty good way and really resonates with runners if you show them this. We know that this is so important because it puts a lot of stress on the body. And not only does it put stress on the body, but it puts torque and braking force. We can see this with Achilles issues. We see that it increases vertical ground reaction forces as well as those horizontal braking forces that we talked about. And it just in general, there's a lot of stress on the body when we're overstriding. And this can lead to some of those big injuries for anything from the knee, the shin, the foot, the back, the hip. All of those can be related to this overstriding. So one of the things I really like for this is doing some drills of some marching to give a little bit of proprioception and awareness and get them to be able to understand where the foot is landing in space. The trick with doing this is making sure that when they're going, we see this from the side view well, that the feet are overlapping. So you don't want one foot to go so far in front of the other foot that they wouldn't intersect on a horizontal line here. So there's some really good drills that you can do, and there's variations of this marching. I'm going to put a handout in for this week, so head over to rundna.com and check out the blog for the handout, where you can download a handout on doing some of these drills. But this is one of my favorite for overstriders, gives them a lot of feedback and information, so definitely one I encourage people to do. Now, as far as retraining the gait, one of the things we'll do if you want to get them to improve their running form, here's a good example of how you can change a lot of that running form. So in this, we're going to see this is kind of the desired form. So you're seeing how the foot's landing directly underneath of the knee, the foot is at a relatively flat position, the shin is vertical, and the leg, the hip is kind of extending well before the foot hits the ground. That's what we really want in this position, and they have a nice high knee angle here. One of the things we do in our level 1 course, we introduce overstriding and go over a lot of other recommendations and how to identify it and other drills and exercises that you can do. But in our level 2 course, we actually break overstriding down into 4 different subcategories of that. So we even talked to you about how to look at some of those things. If in general, if you're looking at somebody, if you see that they're overstriding and they have a slower cadence, so below 167, 168 or so, if they're in that range, cadence can be a great thing to reduce some of the stress that we see with overstriders and help them improve their form. But remember that not all strides are created equal. In this picture, we'll see both of those runners at 170 steps per minute, where the picture on the left, that foot's still way out in front of the knee. The person on the right, that foot's landing underneath of the knee. So I say that just to encourage you to realize that, actually we see with our 3D about 1 out of 4 people actually changes their mechanics with cadence, but it's a great place to start. And most of all, look for that subjective report of improved feel. So this is kind of a real quick overview of overstride, and we went through that kind of fast, but realize there's a lot of nuance to this, and there's a lot of things. But if you're starting to work with runners and you're wanting to dive more into it, overstriding is a great place to start, and you can learn more about that in the level 1. And if you really want to go into it, level 2 really breaks down and looks at the 4 different types of overstriders and how you can use different cues to help people improve their form. So we hope you'll check that out and enjoy the running drills and cues that we talked about here, and thanks for tuning in.